Okay, so good evening all and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Economy, Place, Access and Transport Scrutiny Committee. We have a relatively light agenda tonight, but that doesn't mean the items for discussion are not important, of course. Welcome to the thousands watching at home. It used to be millions, but I believe the numbers have dwindled. First item on the agenda, we have apologies for absence. I don't have any apologies. I've just got Councillor Ben Burton on his way, I believe, and Councillor Christian Vassie on his way. I think that's everyone covered. Any declarations of interest from colleagues around the table? No, brilliant. Item 3 is public participation. Tonight we don't have any speakers, which is a shame, but sometimes that happens. So we find ourselves on item 4 within a matter of 1 minute. Fancy that. And that item is the Finance and Performance Monitor 2. I believe we have Patrick Looker once again. You know the drill, Patrick. We take the paper as read, but if you want to give a very brief overview, we can get into questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, only feels like yesterday I was here giving you details of Monitor 1, so it's only about 6 weeks later we're going to Monitor 2. So, as you know, this is the report extracted from the Finance and Performance report that goes to Executive, which went in middle of November. It gives members with details of the overall financial position of the Council, which is a projected overspend of 2.8 million at this time. That's very much an improved position on where we were this time last year, which we were reporting over £11 million. From paragraph 23, you'll see more detailed analysis of the financial position across transport, environment and planning and city development services. There is a forecast underspend across transport, environment and planning of 610k. The detail is provided in the report, but it's fair to say it's very similar to where we were at the last quarter, where we were reporting 547k. So it's only 60,000 difference over the 2 months that have passed. So from paragraph 32, the business intelligence team have identified the performance scorecards for this scrutiny, and Annex 1 provides all the detail. You'll probably notice that we're a bit light in terms of some of the service officers around the table. So whilst Simon can probably assist in some of the areas of economy, I haven't got anyone from transport or highway, or environmental services. So if there are performance questions in those areas, we'll probably have to get further information back to you at a later time. So I apologise for that.
Thank you, Patrick. Colleagues, anyone want to get us started? Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, but given your last sentence or two, probably could all be answered very quickly altogether. The first one is on, where is it? It's page 16, 17. The heading says about increasing the supply of affordable housing, but in the numbers, the 658 for net housing concepts includes, well, I know that the land in Ruffolk, those houses aren't really affordable, they're just houses. So I'm wondering about the validity of the heading, the title in that bit. So that's my first question. The second thing is, I noticed the wonderful news that bus use has gone up a lot, and just wondered if that will mean that people could push the bus companies to start managing them more proactively to make them more passenger friendly and increase the frequencies and just generally make them more usable to further encourage passenger numbers, because presumably they're getting the income now because they've got the more numbers. And what was the final one? Oh, yes, EV charging points hasn't moved. Have we given up on the ambition to put in EV charging points?
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Patrick.
Okay, in terms of affordable houses, obviously a lot of affordable housing does come from developments that aren't CYC, so through the planning decisions that are made, proportions will be affordable. So when housings are built across the city, affordable housing should increase. But I will see if I can get some further detail on that paragraph that you refer to as to where those were. regarding transport, my limited understanding is we are part of a bus partnership. So we do have regular meetings with the bus companies about what the council's putting in terms of investment through the bus service improvement plan and what we expect the bus companies to support in the same way. But the council has a very limited ability in getting the bus companies to do things that are what class as purely commercial services. But our hands are quite limited. And EV charging points, we're still delivering EV charging points. We have had some successful grant funding, particularly from the Levi programme, which should be leading to increases in EV charging. I think we're planning to do a scheme at Askham Bar, Union Terrace, and some further improvements in EV. So we are still investing in that.
Thank you for that, Patrick. It's worth saying that we did have a really, I think, useful scrutiny session on EV charging. It must have been about half a year ago. It's gone very quickly. But we can look to getting a specific update on that again in 2025, because there'll be a new strategy, we're told. So it'd be good to get a good look at that in a timely fashion. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, it's also issue about the bus information. I wouldn't get your hopes up too much. Those were the provisional 2022 figures in the chart. We're now on December 2024, and considering we've got an enhanced partnership with the bus companies, our inability to provide any up-to-date stats is a sort of matter of concern. But that's one, hopefully, Patrick, you can prod your colleagues on. The other issue is we previously discussed on one of the earlier performance reports that we really needed something equivalent to the information about housing purchase affordability on housing rent levels in the city, and some information was circulated, but it's something that I was hoping that would in effect appear regularly in the charts in future. So again, if you might be able to talk to colleagues about that. I appreciate it was relatively recent, so they may not have had the chance, but don't want to let it go.
Yeah, I'll take both those matters on, and I'll prod and see whether we can get this as a regular inclusion in the figures.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've also been recently told that the Union Terrace EVs, which have been substantially delayed, is hopefully now approved and is going to proceed. The officers are still chasing the grid company, Northern, whatever it is, over arrangements at the Monk Bar car park, where we've got an area fenced off where they partly constructed the new EV facilities, but it has been in effect semi-abandoned for the last 2 and a bit years.
Thank you, Councillor Merritt. I should have said this at the beginning, colleagues, but please can we try to maintain brevity and be quick with questions, otherwise the time really racks up and other people might not get their questions in. Next on my list, I've got Councillor Jane Burton.
Okay, 2 very quick ones. Just congratulating you on item 12, which is the mental health hubs, which I believe are doing rather well. But my question really is about paragraph 10 on page 5, about the increase in adult social care and the people using it. Can I just, is it that 250 people get combined adult social care with the NHS and City of York Council? Or is it up? Is that the increase that has led to the increase in the budget? I wasn't quite clear from reading that.
I think, to be fair, that information is included as a background for members. The details of the adult social care indicators are considered by the adult social care scrutiny, and so we do go into a lot of depth and a lot of detail around those sorts of topics. So there's no one from adult social care who's able really to answer that in
Okay,
the economy and place scrutiny. So
Yeah.
I cannot help you there. I think that's sort of outside the remit
Okay.
of this particular area.
I can chase that up. But thank you.
Thank you. Next, I've got councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to ask about point 59 on page 19 about the trees. So I see that 40 standard trees been planted, which is great. 1,200 saplings, I think, being planted, which is wonderful as well. But I understand there have been some tree removals as well over the past few months and over the past year, particularly for trees that may need to be removed for a good reason. I was just wondering whether there's a net gain around there, and if you could explain about some of the trees that may need to have been removed, whether we're making a commitment to make sure that they are in turn replaced.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Whitcroft, that's totally outside my expertise areas, and I wouldn't even try to pretend to answer that one, so I'll put that down on the list of getting further information.
Thank you, and that's probably another topic that we can have a specific look at in the 2025 programme. Are these supplementaries, colleagues? Okay, I'll put you to the back of the queue, but it's not that big of a queue, you'll be delighted to hear. Do you have any more questions, Councillor Whitcroft, at this stage? Okay. Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. One, Patrick, that you should really have a good stab at. Page 8, Power 22 table, use of earmarked reserves, 1,089,000. At a guess, I'm guessing quite a few of the earmarked reserves are from capital projects, in which case the source of that reserve would have been capital, and some of them will be from revenue projects, so the source of it will be revenue. Are we making sure that when a reserve comes from capital, it's going to repay capital and isn't subsidising revenue, which I don't think we're allowed to do?
We certainly do not. We don't use capital reserves to fund revenue expenditure. They are earmarked for capital purposes. So these earmarked reserves are very much revenue reserves, which can therefore be used to offset revenue. And what we do on a regular basis across finance is review what officers have put aside into particular reserves as to whether, primarily to undertake schemes which are part of the priorities, but we've always got to have a mindful for what the overall financial position is and whether or not some of those are actually required to use to support the overall budget. But some of these, again, until we get to the final year-end position, we won't have fully determined our strategy for balancing the budget. And ultimately, it'll be a member's call as to whether we use general reserves, earmarked reserves. And normally we'll put a recommendation to members on that, but it is a member decision.
Can I just ask a quick?
Of course.
That's what I talk. Are we getting to the point now where prudently we've drawn down as much of the earmarked reserves as we can, or is that likely to be the end of this year, end of next year?
We didn't draw down as many reserves as we originally assumed we would do to balance the 23-24 budget. So there was still some left, which we had earmarked to support last year's budget, but which weren't required when the overall outturn came in at a better position. Therefore, there are still some reserves out there, which we, in our professional opinion, we can still use to balance the overall budget. But there's not an unlimited line of them. So you're quite right, at some point we need to be turning even the £2.8 million overspend. We really don't want to be there at the end of this financial year, but we are confident that we should be able to get that position much closer to break even by the end of the year through good budget management.
Thank you for that. I've got one very quick and specific question. You might not be able to cover this, Patrick, but I will try you. I'm looking at paragraph 30, looking at the shortfall in income from building control due to very limited staffing resources. I feel like that's been an issue for some time. Is it a recruitment challenge? Are we trying to recruit? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I do. It's a national problem of building control service providers. The wages in the private sector for building control are massively are higher than anything that we can readily offer within the public sector. So it's incredibly difficult to recruit. We've tried on a number of occasions to get staff in. I believe we've got a member of staff starting in the new year, but equally our other building control officer is leaving in the new year. So there will still only be, I believe, one, maybe two members of staff. The head of planning is still coming up with strategies for how we manage that position, but we don't see any easy solution in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. One small point is the number of housing approvals needs reducing a bit, because in Copland Thorpe it was 140 that was recently approved, not 158. So that just shows on our reports we'll have to build some somewhere else. And then just a couple of questions on page 11. I've got the universal claims figure where it goes up by 500 from over the Q1s basically, and as 35 says, it's a mixture of increased claimants and people who are being converting over from schemes. So the question there is, do you know, Patrick, and I'm guessing you don't, the numbers that are one category and the other, because obviously they're totally different categories. And if you don't know, I wonder if it's worth us having that breakdown, because at the moment on the thing it says universal credit claimants up is bad. Well, if they're all just moving across from other benefits and the number of claimants has gone down, it's not bad in any way. That's my first question, if that's all right.
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown, but I'll get that detail through to the committee.
Okay, I think might be worth adding that for the future, unless we're going to get to the point where everybody has been moved across onto universal benefit or universal credit very soon. And my second question was just on the GVA per head. I appreciate it's been going up over the years, it's great, but it's gone up, well over 10% in 1 year, which seems brilliant. So I don't know if it's a question for Simon, but I mean, I thought we'd have some particularly stark reasons for that if you happen to know them.
Welcome, Simon Brereton. Hopefully you can shed some light on Councillor Stewart's query.
Thank you. I'll just have to remind myself exactly what it's saying. These are the GVA figures for 2022-23. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, York has got strong GVA and strong GVA growth. However, the way the stats are put together means there's often quite a lot of fluctuation because it's some of it is done from on the basis of sampling, and because York's a relatively small economy compared to the other places they're looking at, so it does need looking at within the margins of error that are published at the same time, which I don't think are quoted there. However, we have seen continued strong GVA growth, and it was interesting to see data that's come out very recently in terms of employment in York, particularly strong growth in jobs in the university, and also in some of our high value sectors as well. So there's an ongoing continued shift in the York economy to higher value jobs, which bring greater GVA and therefore greater GVA per head with them. So I think, I mean, I'd say what you have to look is at long-term trends in this rather than annually, whether it's gone up or gone down, looking at it over a 5 or 10 year period is a better way to look at it. But we are seeing that continued growth. The other thing that I know has changed our GVA figures over the years has been when we have LNER in our building here with us at the moment, rail jobs, which are a particularly important part of the economy, where those are registered depends partly where the company that people work for are registered. And we've seen over the last 10 years, as some of the rail companies have gone in and out of public ownership, it has changed where those jobs are registered, and it's had quite a marked effect on GVA figures for York as well. So obviously over that period, there has been some changes in terms of rail companies being brought into the operator of last resort as well. So it may be that that's affected it as well. So some of those rail jobs are being registered here as opposed to being registered somewhere else. But I'll say you need to look at long-term trends, particularly with these GVA figures. But we do still continue to perform pretty well as a city, particularly compared to other places around us. As we talk about in the economic strategy, the difficulty is that doesn't necessarily, while we are one of the strongest economies in the north, wages in York are average rather than being above average. So getting that translation of high GVA into high wages remains our challenge as a city, but we are in a relatively strong position. Those are 22-23, I suppose the other thing to say is those are 22-23 figures, and we're still being affected by the coming out of the COVID lockdowns and such like. York's had a very, very low level of people being laid off during COVID, and also companies tended to keep their workforces on as well, which has been helpful for those figures as well. So some of those things in terms of our relative position to other places has changed in the last few years as well to the positive for York. So a whole series of things and things that affect that, but it's very hard to come down to a kind of a single reason why any of those stats change. And as I say, of course, they are subject to things like sampling and also fluctuation because of the size of York.
Thank you for that, Simon. Is that supplementary, Councillor Merritt? Right, we'll put you to the back of the line. Next, I've got Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points in the table on page 27. Indicator CES 14I, that's number of people killed or seriously injured. It's gone from 42 in 2022 to 64 in 2023, but the direction of travel is down as green, which I think probably should be red. So that wouldn't make sense otherwise. Unless I've misread that. And the other one was further down the page, CES 76, total tons of waste used for energy recovery. So there's sort of 3 years worth of quite high numbers, and the first quarter is a very low number, and were that to be replicated in the subsequent quarters suggests the waste is not going to energy recovery, it's going somewhere else. Again, you may not be able to answer, but I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, I can pick that one up because it's quarterly. 4 quarters would be the annual amount. So the first half of the year is 1386. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at misspend.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, 862 plus 860. Oh no, I'll check it.
No, I think you're looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong one.
Which
one was it? Sorry?
Total tons of waste used for energy recovery, CES 76.
Is that on page 28?
27.
Oh.
Just quarter
Oh,
one.
yeah,
Would that to be replicated in the other quarters, it would be a much lower figure than previous years.
Unless that was limited, because I believe the services shut down for its maintenance in the first quarter at some point, but it does look wrong to me as well, so
Okay, right.
I'll look into that one.
Thanks for raising that, councillor Fenton. Supplementary, councillor Burton?
Yeah, and I don't think there'll be an answer now, but just on the people killed or seriously injured one, it is a massive increase within a year on a number that was pretty stable before. So I just wonder if we get some information in future about whether we have any reason about why that's being driven or what kind of vehicles it involved, because it's a big jump, isn't it?
Thank you, councillor Burton. Councillor Merritt, we're back on you, and then I'll look to bring this item to a close, if I may.
Yes, it was the same question on the total tonnage of waste and also on the municipal waste sent to landfill CES 37, which has also gone up quite a bit. The two may be linked, but we'll wait a response.
Okay. Thank you. So a real mixed bag there, and I'm grateful for you trying, Patrick. Multidisciplinary as ever. There's various actions there and things to clarify. Be grateful if you can follow up. And then if it's okay, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. So yeah, Simon, you're welcome to stay at the table as our other guests join us. So with us, we have Simon Brereton again, Councillor Kilbane as the relevant executive member, Claire Fowle, Council Officer, forgive me on your job title, Claire. Just today. Thank you. And we have Andrew Leeming as a representative from the Combined Authority. So colleagues, this is an update on the council's economic strategy, but it touches on a lot of different strands of work. Colleagues may recall, I think Councillor Stewart raised this way back. There was an ask also for some clarity on the work that each relevant body does in terms of economic development between the council, the Combined Authority, Make It York, the Economic Partnership, and whether there was sort of possible duplication in there or even opportunity. So that was another part of this, but we've got all sorts of information, which we will take as read. But before we get into questions, I would welcome a brief overview from whoever's primed to give it. Claire, I'm assuming you're well versed in this, so whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So we brought this report to you today. It sets out, as the Chair's described, a number of different aspects of the economic strategy update. We've provided an overview of the policy environment, which is really critical at this time, particularly in light of emerging and national policy around the industrial strategy and the work, ongoing work with the regional combined authority, not just in the sense of setting out the regional economic framework, which took place in spring this year, but also setting out the local growth priorities that respond to the industrial strategy and the work taking place at a combined authority level. Later today, we'll come on to talking about our response, so the City of York Council's response to the regional local growth plan, to give you an opportunity to comment. That comment is similar to the exercise you took with us during the summer, where we invited you to comment on the mayoral pipeline proposals. So it's the next stage of that. The report also sets out significant work that Simon and team have undertaken around the UK Shared Prosperity funding, which, as you'll know, is coming to the end of its natural life, if you like, a 3-year funding programme, and we're waiting to hear from national government about the next 12 months allocation. We know there is a 12-month allocation, we just don't know how much at this stage. The report goes on to talk about the roles of skills, particularly thinking and considering the fact that the adult education budget is now being devolved to the Mayoral Combined Authority, and the work that we're doing to work with the Combined Authority to set out the skills agenda for the City of York. It talks about regeneration and the role of regeneration, particularly looking at Acomb Front Street and the city centre in terms of how that might fuel economic growth and prosperity. It moves on to business support activity, much of it funded through UK SPF. And then finally sets out the number of partnerships that the economic strategy and the growth in the economy is supported by, including the Mayoral Combined Authority, the City Leaders Group, the Economic Partnership, the Business Intelligence Group. So the Business Intelligence Group is not the business intelligence team that sits within the council. It's a group of business representatives that tell us what's happening kind of out there in the real world. Established during COVID, it's been absolutely critical to understand some of the issues and challenges the business community are affected by. It shares some information about Make It York and shares the shareholder report to give you an overview of the work of Make It York. I just wanted to note as well, before we get into questions, with your permission, and if interested, would like to visit you on a later date to talk about the state of the economy. The Economic Partnership will receive a report about the state of the economy in February. That gives you an opportunity then to look at it in more detail. This instead provides more of an overview of the types of work going on to support the economic strategy. Open to questions.
Thank you, Claire. And that's all really helpful, and appreciate the heads up about that last item too. Colleagues, does anyone want to get the ball rolling? Councillor Whitcroft and Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report. This is sort of the first time we've had an economic update since the birth of the Combined Authority. And I understand that Councillor Kilbane, the relevant executive holder for this job, is also helpfully the Deputy Mayor of the Combined Authority. But aside from that, have we established effective ways of working? What is the current business relationship like between the council and the Combined Authority? How often do you regularly engage with each other? How's it going? And I understand there's a large amount of organisations, business intelligence team, business intelligence unit. How are making sure that we're all coordinated towards one unified goal on that?
Do you want to start? Yes.
I can sort of set the overview if you like, and then officers can come in with the detail. I think while the Combined Authority is its own legal entity as an organisation, I think we have to remember that the Combined Authority is North Yorkshire and City of York. There are only two constituent parts to it. And the Mayor, of course, can't forget the Mayor. So three constituent parts, because the Mayor is a personal vote elected by the residents of York and North Yorkshire. So we are all essentially aiming towards the same place. I think last time I was here, I described our relationship between the different organisations and the different political parties. We're all very good. And I think one of the reasons for that is that within the Combined Authority, we are pretty set in what we're focused on. You know, one is economic growth, which is what we'll be looking at here today in some detail. But the other areas of the remit for the Combined Authority are net zero, transport and housing. And I think focusing on that, I think we know this as local councillors, don't we? The things that we need to focus on, the things that matter on the ground to our people, transport, housing, etc. I think we cross-party can work on that quite easily and quite closely, because we're all just fixed on that outcome for your residents. And I think that same philosophy applies across the whole of York and North Yorkshire, in that we are fixed on the outcomes that are going to work for our residents. You know, North Yorkshire is seen as being in the public mind. I think North Yorkshire suffers from the same thing that York does, in that it seems being an affluent place, whereas we all know that there are pockets of entrenched deprivation in York, as indeed there are in North Yorkshire. And we're focused, all parties in York, on tackling that. The same can be said for North Yorkshire, and therefore the Combined Authority.
Thanks, Councillor. So just to pick up on some of the sort of day-to-day operations with the Combined Authority, I was really fortunate, as was Andrew. I don't know if Andrew thinks it's fortunate, but we've taken the whole process of devolution from the very start, from shaping out the asks, which we worked with local councillors through a series of rinsing and discussion, right the way through the establishment of the combined authority last January, the election of the mayor, shaping out the regional economic strategy pre-mayor, refreshing it post-mayor, so took on board the mayor priorities, and then now working very closely on the local growth plan and that relationship between the region and Whitehall. And I would say we talk at least weekly, where we arrange workshops with the combined authority as partners. The combined authority arrange workshops with us as partners, and actually it's a very strong partnership where we're collectively working out the best way to deliver for the city and the region. Obviously, we're here today to represent York, so the Annex A is actually the council's and the city's response to the local growth plan priorities. But on different occasions, we'll wear different hats, or I'll particularly wear a different hat, where sometimes I'm not just representing York, I'm thinking, well, how does that, what's the influence of York across the region? How can we expand that scope and that opportunity? So it's not just a benefit to York, but actually it's a springboard to actually support the region as well. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, from our perspective, throughout the development of the economic framework originally and through to the growth plan that we're developing now, it's been very much a collaborative process with the two authorities. And probably there is a slight advantage here that we actually are based in West offices and we have those regular meetings, but we certainly have regular meetings at North Yorkshire as well, and where possible joint meetings, so we are serving our own resources as well as the local authorities in terms of not duplicating those discussions. I think what we did as well, I think when I appeared here a while back about the economic framework, I think one of the points that we were making at the time, and I think Councillor Kilburn was making at the time, was our economic framework was very much built on the two economic plans of the two areas. We weren't creating something that went against those or was a brand new strategy that was just going to ignore the fact that you already had your economic plans. On a day-to-day basis, I think the other point to raise is there is a lot of knowledge and expertise within the two authorities and certainly within the City of York, which we don't always have in resource and capacity at the combined authority. Particularly, say to take an example on the skills agenda, we very much work with your skills teams on that side of things. And certainly on transport and housing, we do, because we don't have that level of resource currently within the combined authority. So working together is the only way we can actually make this, make this work going forward.
I'll just add a little to that. I think, strategically we're well aligned. Our economic strategy, which is the topic of this report, you can see the influences of it in the economic framework that there is at the combined authority, just as you can see the influence of the North Yorkshire economic strategy. Our skills plan very much sets the tone of a lot of the skills input into that framework as well. So strategic, our tourism strategy for York, together with North Yorkshire's destination management plan, make a tourism framework for York and North Yorkshire. So good strategic alignment. In terms of practically how do we work together, now there are a relatively small number of us across those three organisations working on economic development, and of course we work closely together informally and more formally. But informally, let's take skills as an example. We've got every 2 or 3 weeks we have what we call a skills huddle, where we get together those working on skills here in the council, those working in North Yorkshire on that agenda, and Andrew's colleagues in the combined authority, and we talk through kind of where are we going, what do we need to do, how are we going to respond to some of the initiatives that are coming down from government, how do we best who's best placed to do what, and what do we need to do to make sure we can react as quickly as we can. If you look at something like inward investment work, then the small team we have in York working on inward investment work very closely with the team in the combined authority in terms of responding to inquiries that come through. and with North Yorkshire as well. And we have and proactively we go out and work together up things like the UK Reef Inward Investment exhibition. I've put very much a combined North Yorkshire and the Combined Authority response forward to all of those things. So I think I can see very strong work together and a lot of alignment. And yeah, there are some times when we've got a particular York angle we want to push, and we do that. And North Yorkshire will, if something comes up that's particularly pertinent to North Yorkshire, they'll push on that as well. And then Andrew and his colleagues try and work with us to make sure we add it all together and create something that's greater than the sum of the parts. So yeah, it has been very interesting over the last couple of years seeing the Combined Authority get to its feet and to be part of that collaboration. And as Councillor Kilbane said, we have the advantage of being a combined authority which has got only 3 constituent parts. If you only have to get a little bit, but if you look at West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the challenge they have with 5 local authorities and the mayoral team, there's a lot more kind of conflict within that because there are so many different perspectives, but we've got a lot more in common here in York and North Yorkshire between us and the other parts of the jigsaw. So I think it works quite well.
Thank you for that. Great question too, I should say. Councillor Stewart, I see you, Councillor Fenton. I'll add you to the list.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think as you sort of said at the start, I've often been concerned about some of the duplication, and my thought is very much how when people, ring me up and they say, you were at Economy in Place last night, you were hearing about the economic strategy, what does it mean for us? And that's what, what I struggle to sort of go forward. And I just think there's a danger. We have all the collaboration, we have the joint work, we have all those sort of, terms, and I don't really see the tangibles. Can I ask 3 questions? And I'll make 1 comment if I can. So 3 questions. One is they're all tourism related, so it's all a sort of theme. One very specific one, the purple flag, which I don't think you refer to in here, but obviously we'll talk about what's the ongoing cost of that? And is there any sort of, it's not much, I know, but is there any evidence that it's actually making any more people come to York as a result? And I do literally mean any people at all, 1 person, whatever it may be. My second question is probably for Councillor Kilbane, which is about the tourism tax potentially. I had a phone call today from the Telegraph asking my views on it. As I understand it, and correct me where I'm wrong, we can't implement a tourism tax at the moment, but we can do some sort of bid version. And so my question would be, what's the administration's current view on it? How does that sit within the Combined Authority? Would it be a York tourism tax? And also just from a general point, just sort of saying about the whole, I think it's something that would be really helpful if we work together, so that York speaks potentially as one if we can, whether we agree or we don't, but to have those conversations, mindful that it may not be a Labour administration forever. And so I think some of those things can be positive. And my third question was, Simon, you talked about the fact that we've got the York strategy on tourism and the North Yorkshire. I appreciate they were historic to a degree, so obviously the mayor's come into being. But my question really is the extent to which we are now able to move forward as York and North Yorkshire tourism and what that looks like, might want for Andrew potentially. I mean, from my point of view, if we're looking at a wealthy tourist from China, they're not going to pop to York for the weekend, but they might pop to York and North Yorkshire for 2 weeks or something like that. So it's to get some of those tangibles potentially for where we actually can do so. And then my final, if I can just make 1 comment, Chair, and then you won't hear from me again at all, is just, I didn't realise the York Economic Partnership was going still, and I don't know if it's been going throughout, but I just Googled who's on it. And for me, that's an example of where I personally think we're failing from an economic point of view, because I look at all the organisations on there, I think some brilliant organisations, but you've got so many different entities. And I think, what on earth have they got to do with economic growth? And so you get these things where you get these meetings where there's so many people involved that it just means, half the people gave apologies. That used to be the case when the Economic Partnership was in being that I was aware of 10 years ago, and we didn't have anywhere near as many people on. So that's just more a comment, because I appreciate other people will disagree, and Councillor Kilbane was straight away writing, so people will think they add value, but my personal view is they don't. So thank you very much, Chair.
You're very welcome, Councillor Stewart. A range of questions there. Grateful for answers.
Yeah,
I can divvy them up, that'd be better.
I was just writing, right to businesses say Councillor Stewart doesn't like you. Okay. No, I know, well, I'll take that one first, Chris, and then, I mean, others by all means come in. I think one of the issues is about, as a council, we don't know the answers. But as a collective, as a city and a region, we do. So the stakeholders can be huge and unwieldy in terms of the people that you want to involve, and that can lead to quite long lists of people that are involved. We do get criticised for not involving people more than we do get for over involving people, I think. So I think it's best to err on the side of caution with that. Actually, the note that I was making is that I think there's more chance of Labour losing control of the council and not hearing from you again the rest of this evening. But we'll see how the night plays out. In terms of the tangibles, a really good example of the tangible difference it makes all working together would have been last week. We had Beth Russell visit, who is a very senior Treasury official, runs the Darlington campus, the unit from Whitehall of Whitehall Departments that operates very successfully out of Darlington. And we could bring it to York. It's a regional focus, but we could all come together and absolutely impress her with the drive and commitment. We involve local businesses, we involve Minster, the universities, lots of other people. But the drive and the commitment that is here for the asks that we are now making from Whitehall, so that we're all together, we're focused, we want to get going with things. So the most obvious thing that we would be asking her for is a government commitment to the government building on York Central. Now, essentially, I mean, that we keep on getting told it's all okay, but we want that signed off. So we can all collectively influence it, because while that building will be in York, and it's really important for York, it's also really important for the region in terms of the expertise that it's got. So it's definitely related, most probably. So in terms of that science expertise that it brings to the region, in terms of what our priorities are, then it's really important. So, I mean, I think that's a tangible benefit of the three organisations coming together. Similarly, the Mayor can advocate for York and North Yorkshire directly to Treasury and to Keir Starmer's office. So I think, you know, we have a power now that we didn't have before. And in terms of all of the proposals that you've got in front of you in your papers tonight, that we've worked through over a long period of time with lots of different partners and stakeholders and officers, they all now fit into the mayoral combined authorities growth plan, because that is the direct ask to government for funding for all of these growth targets, for them to get behind the growth targets that we have for York and for North Yorkshire. So we've got real benefit of doing this in a combined way, because there might be some cash at the end of it. Purple flag, I think it's not so much having the accreditation, but the and to be fair, Yorkbrid organised and run this scheme on ours and lots of organisations in the city's behalf. So I'm talking a little bit remotely because Yorkbrid manage it, but it's the process of it, I think, more than the accreditation. So it's the things that you do to get it, the working together that you do, the eyes on the street, even just seeing those purple signs everywhere, you know. I mean, I love the one that says we've got enough history. Have you seen that one in town? It's on Feesgate, one of those shops. We've got enough history, so, you know, behave with respect and don't get too pissed and, you know, cause a problem. We've got enough history, you know. So I mean, I just think that's great. It's all purple and it's on the bollards as you go in, not the sliding ones. And you kind of, you know, I think it has an effect. Well, put it this way: we get hen parties coming here because they think it's a safe place to come. You know, they would sooner come here for a hen party than livelier towns in the north, shall we say? So, you know, I think to an extent it's working. Though I share some of the scepticism around these things. You know, I think we need to keep an eye on them. In terms of the tourism levy, we were making progress with that with the Hospitality Association in York. There's been a little bit of a change of personnel there, and it has been in stasis for a while. The only way that we could do, well, there's two ways that we can do it. One is a voluntary tourist levy through all of the hotels just agreeing to do it for the good of York. I think some of their concerns were partly about it's partly about occupancy rates, but I don't think that was too much of a worry. I think more of the concerns that would all the hotels do it, and if some hotels didn't do it, would that give a competitive advantage? And they were very concerned that Airbnbs wouldn't do it. For some reason, you know, there is this thing out there that people who run Airbnbs are a bunch of shysters destroying our communities. Well, I'm sure that's not the case. But that perception was out there, and that was making them feel as though they were putting themselves at a disadvantage. What they could do is they could set up an accommodation bid, and that's happened in other cities where the hotel industry comes together essentially and sets up an accommodation bid, just like the bid that we've got now. It then does become compulsory for businesses within that bid area to collect the tourism levy. They could do that. It would be long a process to do it. It wouldn't necessarily happen because the hotels have to vote on it. So I know in Bournemouth they voted not to have a bid when they got to that point. Other places, I think Manchester's got one. It might be Liverpool. So they could do that. But the other thing is that we also currently have a very successful bid in York who do lots of really good stuff. And that might mean a separate bid because all of the hospitality industries would come out of that. With both of those programmes, what that money is spent on is largely in the gift of the people who are organising the bid and deciding how and collecting the money. And we've been fairly clear with the hospitality industry that if there is a tourism levy in York, which we all want, because there's 1.7 million overnight stays in York per year, well, there was last year. You know, if you charge £2.50 per tourist, then you'd be on, you know, over 5 million quid a year, wouldn't you? And I've got to say, I've talked to some of the people who run the posh hotels, and they're kind of saying, yeah, our guests wouldn't look twice at that. In fact, quite a lot of them are surprised that there isn't a tourism levy to pay the international guests. So, I mean, I think it's really doable. I think it's a no-brainer. It's a win for everyone. The question is how we do it, because we as a council will want that money to be spent on the whole of York, not just the city centre or around the areas of the hotels who are collecting it, because it will be for the people of York, because tourism does have an impact on all of us. I think personally for the better. I think we're a much better city for it. I quite like all the visitors and the international visitors and the life that they bring to our city, not forgetting the jobs and the industry that it brings. So, but any money that comes in, I think the people of York would expect it to be spent on York. And that includes Acomb, it includes Haxby, Strensall, wherever places that might be off the beaten track. You know, even places like Bishy Road that are firmly on the tourist trail. But anyway, so we're not there with them voluntarily. So we will continue to lobby government for powers to introduce tourist levies by right as a local authority. And then we'll decide where that money's spent, because it will be local authority money. If the hospitality industry are still interested in coming to a voluntary arrangement, obviously we're open for business, but they seem to have pulled away from that. Oh, sorry, there was the LVEP. I'll leave with you, Simon.
So in your specific question around Purple Flag, you'll see in the appendix you have on Shared Prosperity Fund, there's 16,000 a year going to the bid for running Purple Flag. That's to cover the work involved in terms of putting the application together and the cost of hosting the visit that you have to do with the people that run Purple Flag. But it's also running a scheme called Best Bar None, which is around a quality standard for the nighttime economy, around making York a safer place. You know, I think I'd echo what Councillor Kilbane had said. I don't think I've ever been to anyone thought, oh, where shall I go to tonight? I wonder who's got a Purple Flag, because that's not really the point bit. The point, just as I don't think, oh, which beach shall I go? Who's got a, what's the colour of the blue, whatever the colour is of a, yeah. But the point is that people who do come to York in the evening, the collaboration that there is now between the police, between our own community safety teams, the bouncers on the establishments in town, and all the other organisations that are looking at the city centre together, all thinking, well, how do we make sure that York is a safe place to come to? How do we make sure it's easy to get home and safe to get home late at night? how do we make sure that we've got a good system for sharing information between us, and the coordination that Purple Flag presents, I think, represents really good value for money in terms of the better experience it provides. I think it would be really, really difficult to try and go back and say, well, can we prove that it's added any visitors to York? So I'm not sure that's entirely the purpose. The purpose really is to make it safer for those who are visiting. But I think, you know, it's not costing a penny to central coffers or the council. We're using regeneration money that we get from the government to fund it at the moment, and I think and doing more than simply having the Purple Flag accreditation, which those who come and judged us were actually really amazed and blown away at just how good York is at looking after the nighttime economy. So it's good to put yourself for scrutiny in front of others to see how you're comparing with other places, and we are doing actually pretty well in terms of our nighttime economy. In terms, you asked around tourism and how York and North Yorkshire work together, and Councillor Cobain mentioned the LVEP, the Local Visitor Economy Partnership, which is part of the new arrangements that Visit England are putting in place around how tourism organisations and how places work together. We have an LVEP for York and North Yorkshire. And of course, we've got Visit York, which is a really strong business-led organisation, quite unique actually in terms of the way that it's funded. Most other cities have to find money within their budgets to pay for their tourism promotion. We cover that off by all the work that Make It York do. I mean, the Christmas market at the moment, the money they make from that essentially is covers the cost of promoting York to the outside world. So they do a good job around that, a real business-led model. North Yorkshire has been going through changes. It's gone into unitary council over the last couple of years, and they have now a single. They used to have, you know, there was a Visit Scarborough, and there was a Visit the Dales, and there was a Visit Harrogate. There's now one organisation for North Yorkshire, and they have a single what they call their destination management plan. That, together with our tourism strategy, makes the framework for tourism in York and North Yorkshire, and it means that that route for communication with Visit England, Visit Britain, who go out and sell the UK as a destination to the rest of the world. We've got a real strong way of working together on that. And actually, through the process of working together on that LVEP and all the documentation we've got to do for government on that, there has been a lot of work between our colleagues in Make It York and in the Visit North Yorkshire team around, for instance, things like travel trade shows. So I think there's a team of people from York, from Make It York, and from North Yorkshire going out to the Netherlands, to the global travel trade show out there to promote coming to York and having a holiday that involves going to the coast and things as well. They already work and Make It York with, for instance, Castle Howard and North Yorkshire Moors Railway, and it means there's more connections into, well, how do we get people to stay for a bit longer and enjoy their time here? So I'd say it is actually working pretty well, and has strengthened the relationship between Make It York and North Yorkshire, which previously they had to think about talking to Scarborough, talking to Harrogate, talking to everybody differently. They've now got one conversation to have. So in some ways, the new arrangements make it easier to do that and reduce the amount of bureaucracy that's needed to make those things happen. We're not expecting the LVEP to suddenly be given lots of money by government. That isn't the model. It's really a model to try and get people to work a bit more collaboratively together, and then to be part of those international campaigns. So when Visit Britain are going out to the States to promote tourism in the UK, you know, they might look at historic towns. They'll focus on York, but they'll also look at Selby, and they'll look at other places in North Yorkshire alongside that. Or they might be promoting touring around the UK in a camper van, which is one of the growth bits of the tourism sector, and they'll work with us around that, about where do you go in the North Yorkshire coast. So we've got a good relationship. In fact, the chief exec of of Visit England was up in York last week, meeting with the mayor and colleagues from the Combined Authority and the LDAP around how we work together. So I think it is working well, and we're certainly making sure that we're not duplicating efforts, because there are so few people working on all of these areas that there really would be no sense at all in trying to compete with each other, and it has been difficult in the past actually to collaborate as effectively as we are at the moment. Was there anything else I needed to come up on? I think that's. I was going to say, on in terms of it,
I mean, we've had quite thorough answers, and I do want to bring other colleagues in. Is there anything critical?
I was just going to say on the economic partnership, which Councillor Stewart asked about, I would just say there is a whole load in the report about the task and finish groups, which I think are the real value. The kind of grand meeting in this room of 30 odd people is, you know, as hopefully we share some useful information, but the practical support that, for instance, my colleague Tony Corby has around inward investment, looking at putting together inward investment sites for York and North Yorkshire, commenting on the brief and getting industry input into that actually is facilitated by our economic partnership. So we try and use those people from industry who are interested and get them doing more than just turning up to a meeting, and get them involved in steering the work that we're taking forward. Because I think you're absolutely right. The danger with those public committees is go to 2 meetings and they think, what's the point? There has to be a point, and the point is collaboration to help us steer the strategy of the city and actually make a difference on the ground.
You have a supplementary, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Merritt, you had your hand up. Was that a supplementary? Okay, thank you. And okay, right. Thank you for those answers as well. A lot of good questions there. I was actually next in the queue. Whether colleagues will believe me is up to them. I have just 2 questions. The first one, you might have to forgive my ignorance on, but I'm looking at paragraph 24. And it says that the combined authorities awarded CYC 430k to deliver a spatial plan for the city centre. Now, me not knowing much about this sort of thing, I just thought that's $500,000, well, nearly $500,000. Surely we know enough about our city centre already to make better use of it. Exactly what added value is that amount of money going to bring through that exercise? I know it's only one thing out of many, many other things, but that's a lot of money. Any reassurance would be welcome.
So that money, that spatial plan is essentially setting out a delivery plan that would unlock capital investment, starting with, we hope, Parliament Street. So what uses does all the different people that enjoy the city centre, work in the city centre, visit, live in the city centre, need from Parliament Street? And then how can Parliament Street be designed to best meet all of those different needs? So an example might be, do we have a cycle route going through Parliament Street? Is that a separated cycle route? What happens about freight, and whether you have Deliveroo cyclists coming and going all the time, or is it set at different times of the day? Do we have blue badge access route through Parliament Street? If we have a blue badge access route, what happens about the events and the markets that take place in the Parliament Street? How do you level Parliament Street so that the routes aren't sort of pushing up through the paving? All of those different questions, and the cost is as much into technical expertise as it is into engagement. So we are going to need to significantly engage a number of different voices who have different perspectives on what to do with those different spaces in the city centre to try and find a consensus, but then a series of technical kind of assessments as to how you can build a business case to actually access and unlock that capital funding to make those schemes, or deliver those schemes essentially.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, Chair, then, you know, so for example, with the uneven surface that we have in Parliament Street, do we want to do something about that, or are we just going to embrace it and stick a roller coaster on it? You know, okay, slightly frivolous, but if we're going to do something about it, then what's causing it? Is it the trees or is it drainage? Because actually, if you go down Parliament Street and you just have a proper look at it, they're not all those lumps, they're not next to trees, all of them. Some of them are above drains. So that's going to be quite a lot of work to if we decide, and I'm assuming we are going to level out Parliament Street, if we decide we're going to do that, then there's quite a lot of money to work out how much that's going to cost. But as part of the process, what are we using it for? Is it going to be for Christmas markets forever? Is that what we want to do with it? Where are the buskers going to go? How do we embrace them? You know, or do we just keep pushing them over to one corner? How does it tie in with what the Minster are doing with the Minster neighbourhood plan? How does it tie in with what York Museums Trust are doing? Because they've started having gigs in museum gardens. You know, okay, if they're having gigs over there, well, what are we going to do with Castle Car Park? Are we going to have gigs there too? Or do we think that the other all that kind of bringing together of everything so that we've got a logical plan for investment in the city centre and working up so we can go to the mayoral combined authority or to government or private investors, whoever it is, depending on the project, and say, this is the plan, this is how much it's going to cost, this is why we're going to do it. That takes quite a lot of working out.
Okay, appreciate your answers. I'd love to get into it more, but we have a queue. My second question, and again, I hope you forgive and understand where I'm coming from with this, but there's a lot of good stuff in these papers. There's clearly a lot of great work going on, but this sort of thing, as some of you will appreciate, often leads me to sort of ask, well, how do we know that's going to make a difference, or something along those lines? But I want to flip that and ask, between York and the combined authority, there's very admirable aims and great work going on. But are there any things that we are specifically not doing, or anything that we've specifically and proactively turned away from doing in deciding that this is now our direction of travel? Because in my mind, that would make this feel a bit clearer. Otherwise, it's just lots of good stuff. So to contextualize it, can you share anything that we're not really exploring or investing in that we might have done previously as a result of what we're looking at now? Does that make sense? Of course.
I think I can't answer the question of what your priorities are, but from a combined authority perspective, I think there's two elements here. One is the local growth priorities that were set out, which, you know, the food farming, science and so on, started to be an attempt to prioritisation about those things that the evidence was telling us would give us that competitive edge in the economy, which obviously doesn't include every sector. So we were already accepting that there was things, I'm not going to name all the things that weren't included, but it does start to narrow it down. Obviously, that doesn't exclude, in a sense, the day-to-day businesses that need support, but it was saying that if we're going to prioritise and we're going to target some investment, it needs to be going in that direction. I think the local growth plan will go further in terms of trying to establish that, as well as we develop that further as the process goes on. I think the other part of this was, as well, is that it's also been a bit clearer about what the outcomes and outputs are that we want as a region, and we haven't really yet established that sort of approach of saying what is it that we're aiming to do in a target performance sense, which I think again will start to answer a bit more of a question of what will make the difference, but also and what will be prioritised to make those investments against the long shopping list of things. Because I know you've got a long list of proposals, Claire, in this paper, but the combined authority hasn't got that level of money, and I don't think government probably has that level of money to do that. So somewhere along the line, there will need to be a prioritisation, and some things will not be able to be done against other things that are more aimed. So I think, again, it comes back to working together in terms of what will make the big difference, and also how do we measure that so we can see that it really does make a difference for people and the businesses and the economy of York and North Yorkshire overall.
Thank you.
If I can come in, Chair, then I'm afraid that my cable car from Severus Hill to York Central is looking very dodgy at this moment in time, which is a shame because it's a great idea and we should be doing it. But, you know, I think the way that it works is we are now in a national competition for funding. So the government is drawing up an industrial strategy. First time we've had an industrial strategy in a long time. And it's asked the regions to say what they're best at, because that's what they'll fund. So what we've been doing is making sure that our local growth plans for both York and North Yorkshire are aligned as best we can with a combined authority one that's got a chance of getting funded. So you've got to be on top of the pile. So clearly in this region in North Yorkshire, food and farming is going to be huge, isn't it? Because of the nature of where we are. So that's sort of top of the list when it comes to the asks of government. Then we've got what's called engineering biology, so alternatives to plastics, all that kind of stuff that we're really good at in New York. But of course, because we're in North Yorkshire, we've got all the resources out there because they're growing all around us, the things that we can use to make alternatives to lubricants, well, basically fossil fuel substance, but also engineering biology in terms of if you've got farmers whose fields are flooded now and have been for a while, and then in 5 months' time they're going to be drought and cracked, what the hell are they going to grow? And that's a real problem that we've got people working on. So in York, so there's that sort of synchronicity, I guess. Sorry, I keep on losing my list and I keep on forgetting what's on it. So, and I think, so yeah, there's net zero, which, there's no reason why this region can't be well, I was saying the Aberdeen of the future, but somebody says you need to start saying the Texas of the future, because all of the resources for sustainable energy, we've got in this region. We could power the UK if we stuck wind turbines all over the Pennines. I don't think anybody objects to that, so I'm sure we could get on with it. But anyway, that's just to get you thinking about what we could do as a region, let alone all the stuff, all the bio stuff that we can grow. Then you've got the digital stuff, but the final ask in terms of our growth plan is accelerating sustainable development. And if you like, that's a catch-all for all of the growth things that don't neatly fit into the big ticket numbers that we're asking of government, but it makes sure that we can carry everything through, so long as that's development sustainable. And this is the real issue for us, is how do you get sustainable growth? How do you get growth that just doesn't add to the problems that we face as a world? Whether that's through energy that you use or crap that you leave behind, plastic that you leave behind for burning or well, we can't landfill anymore or export to other countries to deal with. That is a real difficult challenge, but if we're going to do the net zero thing, then we have to do it. And not forgetting there are other strands to the mayoral funding. So there is a housing strand and there is a transport strand and be a net zero strand. So it's not all just about the growth. And some things like my cable car, which I'll say again, just in case any journalists do watch and pick up on it, my cable car from Severus Hill to York Central, that will be under the transport ask. And I can say that in public because the officers can't sit there and contradict me.
I think you should pilot it in your ward first, Councillor Kilbane.
We haven't got anywhere to all of them.
Next on my list at the minute, I've got Councillor Fenton, Councillor Jane Burton, Councillor Merritt, and then Councillor Healy. So next, Councillor Fenton. Thanks for your patience.
No worries, thank you. Probably a question for Claire. I just want to be clear about our opportunity to input, because we've got Annex A, the York response to the local growth plan. Just want to be clear who that response is to and by when. Because it goes on to say, this page 38, it's been discussed with several partners with further discussion planned following Scrutiny's review. So I just wanted to ask, do you actually want comments from us on Annex A, or has that ship sailed? Because it then goes on to say on that page, this report is for information only. So I thought maybe they don't want any comments, but it'd be really helpful. I've got a few, but I just wanted to check whether it was worth me.
I'd love to hear from Scrutiny Committee today. The process has been condensed, so we've been working really hard with officers across the council, with the combined authority, and with some partners that we've spoken to over the course of the last sort of 12 months, I suppose, who've identified their own proposals that they'd like mayoral consideration for. And we're bringing it here today for cross-party consideration, and very happy to take any comments before we then we sort of float it, if you like, with the mayoral combined authority next week, and then further refine it with the city leaders group on the, I'm going to say the 9th of January, early January. So please do, if you've got comments, let me know.
I mean, I think on the whole, it's consistent with the various iterations with the 10-year strategy and everything that's followed since. So it hangs together. think the only thing I thought was potentially missing was some reference to health in the context of sort of supporting people to return to work. So I know it's something that the government have kind of made a made a focus. So and I was trying to think, well, where could you shoehorn that in? So page 47, there's information around lifelong learning and adult ed. It may be something that could be referenced there in terms of maybe people who are, you know, distant from the workforce for whatever reasons. That would be a way to support them to return to the workforce and just get the kind of health thing in there that is potentially missing at the moment. So that was the only thing I was going to mention.
The Trailblazers is the programme from central government, which has awarded the Combined Authority with 10 million to support people back into work. So yeah, we'll have that one. Thank you.
Sadly, it also uses the same terminology as the tansy beetle.
Yes, it
Trailblazers.
does. It does.
Wow, are the tansy beetles, are they sort of somehow involved in this, but obviously not.
And Chair, if I may just very briefly, I'm conscious we're talking a lot. As a council, we have some experience of working with industry to get people back into work who've been, for whatever reason, absent from the industry. And we've got quite a successful project up and running with people with SEND, is that right? Getting those people into work in the construction industry. And so that principle can be applied to lots of people who, for whatever reason, are not in the workforce. There's huge potential out there.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Ben Burton, was that a supplementary? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Councillor Jane Burton.
Very excited about all the developments over the skills section. And I'm interested to know, because there's investment in digital infrastructure and skills, heritage retrofit skills, construction skills, and I wonder what this skills centre that's going to happen is. I mean, there's York College, which provides lots of skills at the moment. The new skills centre is going to be on York Central site, and or what will happen and where will it be? And will you work alongside things like, I think the Minster is building a skills centre at the moment. So will that be incorporated? Will you all work together? I think it's very exciting for the region and for the young people and older people as well, and disabled people who are able to go to work, who could acquire skills that would enable them to do meaningful jobs that they want to do, rather than being forced into something that they don't want to do. And then at the end of that, I'd like you to tell us more, if you could, about on page 51, briefly, embed accessible and inclusive skills and business support available for the disabled community. But briefly,
Thank you, Councillor. I'll try and be brief because there's quite a lot to unpack in that. So we're talking, previously, the university were talking to the developers and the Combined Authority about developing an innovation hub, and that innovation hub would cover things like med tech, creative tech, rail tech, and biotech. And it would be innovation that would identify new ways of doing things and lead to accelerators that would spin out and go across the region to scale up. Through conversation with partners and with adult learning, we identified there's actually a gap between how do you make sure that the innovation hub works for all residents and not just for sort of PhD researchers, if you like. So how do you bring that sense of innovation being an opportunity to demonstrate what good looks like and where you can go and build aspiration and share expertise by having an opportunity for residents who may not have the qualifications that they need to get into those industries, or they may not have had particularly positive experience at school or in further education, or they may have been out of work for a while, and actually using the innovation hub as essentially a lifelong learning campus. So bringing that opportunity to invite residents in and explore new skills, new opportunities to doing things, new ways of working at a very entry level potentially. So maybe using maybe maths or English or accounting or whatever as a way to show and build that confidence to then see actually where would you go next. So it wouldn't replicate or replace the colleges or the higher education offer or in work practices, but it would give residents that opportunity to try new things, build a bit of confidence, and then think, okay, what can I do next? And we've already got some examples of that in adult learning, for example, where residents might go along to a evening class in art or something like that, and from there they think, actually, I've got a real interest in graphic design. Where do I go next? So it's that entry point, really, the Lifelong Learning Centre, but using innovation as a way of building aspiration and inspiration around the art of the possible, really. And in terms of the accessible and inclusive skills and business support for the disabled community, we've spent some time trying to unpick and work out how we can best support the disabled community. And there seems to be a gap around having to get qualified and therefore funded versus learning new skills. And what we want to try and do is bridge the gap between you don't need to be qualified in something to learn about something, and how can we support people learn about new things, learn about new ways of doing things, learn about things they're interested in, that whether they take on for a new career or not, it's kind of stepping stone into something else without necessarily having to sit an exam, because actually sitting an exam or getting qualified is a completely different sort of skill set, if you like, that isn't necessarily applicable to every single job.
Sure.
I mean, but there would be the opportunity were that appropriate.
Oh yeah, of course, yes.
Yeah. And either or.
Yeah.
And where will this actually happen? Because that at the moment, I just would. It's so exciting. I just want it to happen, like in the new year. And obviously it won't. But how long will it be before this takes off and becomes a reality?
We're talking to the developers on York Central about having it on York Central. They've already designed the building, and that building will go to planning in hopefully late summer. How long it takes to build, sorry, don't know. But in the meantime, that gives us an opportunity to work with Combined Authority, work with skills across the region, and work out how to create that ecosystem of early skills, essentially. The first step into what type of opportunities you've got available to you, really, and how to create that kind of safe, inclusive, warm and welcoming environment. That means you can try a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and gradually develop your skills and your confidence in actually learning new things and building that kind of curiosity around your own personal development.
Thank you. Do you
Ju-
want to jump
ju-
in?
Again,
Councillor?
very briefly, and Councillor Burton, the whole point of it being off-site, so on-site, not in a college, although the college do fantastic work, is that psychologically for people, it's easier to go and learn a new skill in that environment than to go back to college. And as I keep on saying, accountants, how long have they got left? 5 years max before the AI data work? We're always going to need plasterers. We're definitely going to need engineers who can build sustainable buildings and heat them.
Simon.
And I think it's great to focus on something new that's going to be a place for that. But a lot of my work is not around the buildings where these things happen, but they're kind of getting people together to support around this. And I think the paper that's going to executive this week on the neighbourhood model is also really important in this. How do we make it not somewhere you have to set off on a journey to go to, but can you go to your local community centre and begin that journey towards actually a different option for you in terms of how you make a living, and how do we support people to make the best of what they're good at, rather than spend a lot of time pointing out what they can't do and what they're not good at. I think it's that kind of asset-based approach, strengths-based approach, and thinking about how we roll that out in the community and how we make sure that all of that support is available to whoever you are, wherever you are, and not something you've got to go through a shiny door to is really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very exciting.
I believe I've got supplementaries from Councillor Hook and then Councillor Healy.
Yeah, given that farming is such a big thing for the region as a whole and also parts of York, actually, is anyone talking to Aston Bryan College? Because that's got a wealth of information there.
Yeah, we have very regular discussions with Aston Bryan College, and also because it covers North Yorkshire, Craven College have some of that element as well over near Skipton. And we do utilise Bishop Burton, which is not quite in our area, but obviously has an influence as another big agricultural college as well. So that network is something that we very much work alongside.
And the chair of the York Skills Board is the principal of Aston Bryan College as well.
And if I could just add very briefly, Chair, that Aston Bryan is not only a jewel in the crown of York, it's a jewel in the crown of the north of England. It is one of the best technical colleges in the UK for what it does. And in particular, what it does is it takes kids, I mean, they have residential kids from 16, and it takes kids with no qualifications and gets them to level 2, level 3. And it does it really successfully. And we're really interested in that.
Thank you. Councillor Burton, is it supplementary?
Just wanted to say that I know that a lot of mature career switches are going there too. Let's not forget the older people. But
Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was just picking up on the point that you made, Claire, about the Innovation Hub. I would be very concerned that we're trying to shove into York Central the aspirations of everyone, and we're going to end up with doing nothing well. I would suggest that that is a unique opportunity to do what you said you didn't want to do, was have it stuffed full of PhDs, people who were creating the tech for the next generation and then spinning it out. It's only a certain physical size. And if we're saying that we're going to take some of that away for not that purpose, and when the college can do, I'd say probably a very admirable job around that purpose, I would suggest that's not the greatest idea, personally. So if I was in Pete's position, I'd knock that on the head.
So if that's the question, I'm guessing you want to say, would you agree?
Yes or no?
Yeah.
It's not really a question. It's more, I was very surprised you said that.
Very happy to answer that one. I think the Innovation Hub is a spin out. So it's as important that we have around that legal people who are experienced in intellectual property rights and business support that take businesses that have got great ideas and help them grow and expand. And that won't be happening on York Central. That'll be happening in the region. So, you know, it is a kind of a launch pad, the Innovation Centre, but it will have lots of very experienced people around it. You know, the focus at the moment is science, really, around that sort of DEFRA bit will be its focus for it. As to the Adult Skills Centre that's there, maybe this is where me and you differ politically, Councillor Healy, but when residents who are living up on Severus Hill look down on York Central, they need to see that as full of opportunity for them, for their kids, for future generations. It is one of the more deprived parts of our city. If they're looking down, seeing a development going on that they're not welcome into and is excluding them, then quite rightly, they'll think, who the hell is that for? We need that development to be for everybody in York, but in particular, people who need to seize opportunity. And that opportunity will be come on in, come into the centre of it, learn a new skill, do something else with your life because your days as an accountant are over, learn how to be a plasterer or whatever it is. That will be, there'll be other gateways in from all of the different great learning centres and areas where you can access education within the city, but there will be a place in the middle of York Central that's for you, especially if you've got limited or no qualifications, and especially if you're looking for ways to improve your living standards. So I don't want it full of PhD students. I want it full of people seizing the opportunities that York Central will offer, and in particular, people who have been denied those opportunities so far in their lives.
Thank you, councillor Kilbane. Councillor Stewart, was that a supplementary?
It is just on councillor Kilbane's twice saying that accountants will have died out in 5 years. I have no doubt whatsoever in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or 20, there'll be hundreds of thousands of accountants in this country. I don't for 1 second think AI will kill them. And I think if we've got PwC or something like that looking at our city, we should be welcoming them in rather than the anti-accountant rhetoric of the executive member.
If I can briefly reply, of course, they're very welcome in our city for as long as the jobs last. They can come in and invest in their AI that's going to be in all of their offices. But I mean, to be honest, Councillor Stewart, I was largely provoking you into response because now that you've spoken, our bet is on, and that means that Labour will still be in charge of the council after the next election.
All right. It's good to have a little bit of fun, but let's keep it tight-ish. Next, I've got Councillor Merritt, who's been very patient. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the growth plan. I did take the opportunity at a seminar the CA organised, but I wanted to ask about the relationship of what we're doing for York and North Yorkshire with the work that's being done by other CAs and so on. I mean, no one's an island to himself. York's not an island to itself. York and North Yorkshire's not an island to itself. And, you know, whilst we're in competition, it's a bidding process, there are obviously also potential win-wins that might be possible working with other authorities outside of York and North Yorkshire. So I wondered, accepting that you've not had a lot of time to do this, what sort of look that you've done on that. And the other aspect of that is, you know, we know from some of the disruption from Brexit and from, you know, Trump's tariff charges last time round, just how interconnected an awful lot of modern industry is. You know, the supply chains for the car companies and so on. You talk about hundreds of businesses and organisations, many hundreds of businesses and organisations that go into that. So if we are looking at trying to develop a role in terms of engineering biology, you know, what are the supply chains that we are tapping into? What bits of the supply chains are we focused on? And who else, in terms of other parts of the country, have key roles in that we can potentially work with in a complementary manner?
Yeah, so in terms of our relationship with the other combined authorities, it's very close in the sense of our immediate neighbours, West Yorkshire and Tees Valley, and I suppose South Yorkshire to the south, but also with the emerging Hull and East Riding combined authority, which should be coming into being next year. And I think, in a way, if you take the engineering biology, what we see is that we are a sort of science base for the engineering biology, which does have spin outs and does have some supply chain, but actually it provides very much for science for some of the more industrial stuff that goes on in Tees Valley and Humber. So we're not trying to compete with those two areas for that, because we're not the right geography to be doing that type of industrial stuff, but we very much work alongside them. So I certainly have regular discussions with my equivalents over in Leeds, over in Tees Valley, and across the country, to be honest, in terms of how we join up.
Thank you for that. Next, I have Councillor Healy. You have a main question.
Yes, thank you. Given the previous item was we have a budget gap, and the medium-term financial forecast is pretty much savings of £8 to £10 million a year. Is the roadmap to gradually move these activities that are primarily now the function of the mayoral authority, so skills, transport, housing and economy, gradually over to be their responsibility, so that we can essentially, well, they can focus on it to the benefit of us all? And also it would probably pick up Councillor Stewart's point of view of it would probably help with accountability as well.
So what's the last bit,
It
Paul?
would probably help with accountability as well.
I think, I mean, I can pick that up from a political perspective, whether or not, whatever our roadmap is, the funding is coming through the combined authority. That's really clear, whether that's for housing or transport or economic growth, it's coming through the combined authority. We've always said that what we need with the combined authority is a combined authority light, as Andrew's already spoken about earlier. We have the skills and the expertise in both local authorities to deliver what we need to deliver. We need to get some more in as well, of course, but by and large, you know, we've got a lot of those skills are there already, and it's a question of utilising them. Now, whether that person is somebody that sits in the local authority or the combined authority, to be honest, I'm quite relaxed about, so long as they're doing the job, because the funding for that job is going to be coming through the combined authority. So whether that's, you know, us recharging or actually somebody being charged out to, you know, however you do it, I don't really care. What matters is that, one, we've got the money to do it, and it's new money that's coming through the combined authorities, and two, that we can keep and retain the staff that we've got in both authorities, because we've got some great experts in both authorities, and employ them on the work that needs doing. So there is potential for both local authorities to have work done that is funded through the combined authority, because that's the way that the money comes. I mean, the most obvious one for this is something that Councillor Hook raised in the previous item, is to do with buses. You know, so next year the buses will all go to the combined authority, and we will start the process of franchising them. So that means that everything will go up to the combined authority, but the expertise on that, and there is some great expertise on it, is sat within both local authorities. Now, who employs them or where they sit is something that will need to be worked out, and be worked out with them and with the trade unions and with the local authorities. But actually, what they're really good at is their job, and making sure that they can do that job across the whole combined authority with any funding that we're getting through it, is the way to do it. So, I mean, there's possibilities there, but nothing is set in stone.
Thank you.
Just to pick up on the budget point rather than the staffing point, all of the purpose of the local growth plan and the proposals that were put into our response to the local growth plan is what we consider turning off the tap. So if we can reduce inequalities, if we can support inclusive growth, and if we can support a sustainable delivery, then some of the demands on statutory services will be reduced, because you'll have people living longer, healthier, happier lives with I mean, it's called compression of morbidity, but essentially, and it sounds really gloomy, but basically you don't take so long to die. So if from a public health perspective, you are well for as long as you possibly can be before you start putting demands on statutory services. And that will have a positive impact, obviously, on our budgets.
We might not use that as a strap line.
No, we might not. Compression of morbidity is what it's called.
Andrew.
I think what I wanted to say to start with is that the combined authority and the resources we have are not there to plug your financial gaps, but actually I think there's an opportunity to get some efficiencies out of three bodies working together. So there are things that are going on in York and things that are going on in North Yorkshire that are very similar, and things that within the combined authority that are very similar, that actually, if we put our heads together, we could actually make that much more effective and efficient for everyone, which could, in a sense, result in savings or resource implications in that context. But you know, we're a combined authority that is only 6 months old, and you know, to understand all the different functions and things of everything will take a little bit of time. But I think ultimately that's the gain, is not to duplicate, but to actually make things much more effective and efficient for the whole of York and North Yorkshire, because that's a hat I wear. And I think there's some real stuff that we could do on that. And I think there's some things already within the Shared Prosperity Fund programme where there are things that are funded through the York Shared Prosperity Fund, there are things that are funded through the North Yorkshire Shared Prosperity Fund. And actually, if you bolt the two together, you could actually deliver quite an effective mechanism at probably a cheaper price, shall I say.
And you know, the document you've got in front of you today is a good example of that. That is work that's gone on in York, that's gone to the combined authority to try and get us some money for it. You know, so that is us working with the combined. So otherwise Andrew would have had to go out and recruit a whole load of people, probably pinched half of our staff to try and work on a local growth plan for York. Whereas we've got the expertise here that's done that.
Go on, Simon.
Yeah, and on a practical level, I mean, I hope we've described this evening to some extent how we are already working well together. I think Andrew's absolutely right. There's more we can do on that. But if you look back at the way that economic development is funded within York Council, it's not very long since Councillor Whitcroft was you're an industry student in my team. And at that point, I had a core budget of getting on for £500,000 to pay for economic development in York. I now have a core budget of £0. But we're actually doing more because we're using the external resources we can draw in through things like the Shared Prosperity Fund to work more effectively. How much further you can go with their resources is a good question, but we're doing a good job of it, and we are spending as little money as possible from the core budget because of the pressures that there are in terms of supporting, you know, the core responsibilities of the council. But economic development is a really important thing, and we have to find the resources we can to do it and to make as big a difference as possible. Because coming back to, you know, the title of this session is Economic Strategy Update. You know, what we're trying to achieve through our economic strategy is increase the prosperity of the people of York. We're trying to increase GVA, and as Councillor Stewart alluded to, the stats are showing that GVA is going up in York. We're trying to increase wages, and the recent annual survey of hours and earnings showed wage growth in York as well. So I think we can show that we're achieving the KPIs that we've set ourselves with less and less resource, certainly from the core budgets being spent.
Thank you. Probably worth saying that the city is up on the deal now that Councillor Whitcroft is on this side of the fence. Next on the list, I've got Councillor Ben Burton, who's been extremely patient.
That's all right. I put my hand up late. Got kind of almost trying to get my head around this a little bit. So I sit on the West Yorkshire Combined Authority one as well, and this seems to it feeds into the industrial strategy nationally, which I've just been reading through with great interest. But they have quite specific fields of where they want to see growth, kind of in 8 defined sectors, and obviously quite a lot of what we're looking at here probably falls outside those sectors. Probably a lot of what North Yorkshire's looking at definitely falls outside those sectors. So it's a challenging remit to put into. I guess more question for yourself, Andrew. How does this process work when it gets up to there's a couple of questions here. How does this process work when it gets up to the mayor in terms of prioritising what's been put forward here? Because there's a lot of things that, are we prioritising this based on what we think has the best chance of winning money, essentially? And also, are we just going to produce a growth plan that covers everything that we think is great and then just let them cherry pick from that? Because I guess there's a couple of ways of looking at this document. Like Leeds is one, when I saw West Yorkshire Combined Authority have huge amounts of stuff in there about where they want to see growth for housing and everything, but that doesn't seem to actually form much of what the national industrial strategy is. So I'm just trying to work out what this document is getting at in terms of what we're putting together. Is it exactly what we want from the national industrial strategy, or is it just a big picture thing and then they pick what they want from that? Is that, I don't know.
It's a good question. I'm not sure if I've got an absolute definitive answer, because I think there's a bit of both. I think what I would say on the response to, are we just looking for the things that government might give us the stuff for? I don't think that's the case. We want to be putting forward the things that are really important to us as York and North Yorkshire. And I think that's how the mayor and the combined authority members judge on this. And that's why we chose those 5 priorities, because the evidence suggests that that's where we could potentially get the most growth. Now, they don't automatically fit with the national industrial strategies, and we've certainly made the point in our consultation back on the industrial strategy that, for example, there is no reference to food industry in the industrial strategy, which we think is a missed opportunity for the nation because of food security and everything else. So we make those points, and I think that's what we need to continue to push. I think in terms of the nature of the documents, I must be honest, it's all been a bit confusing for us as well as everybody else. because we're still writing our local growth plan. I know West Yorkshire, I think, presented theirs, submitted theirs, or presented theirs this week or this time around. We're looking to the spring to have completed our local growth plan, and our local growth plan will include obviously these priorities, but it will also include other things as well. And it'll not just be looking towards the industrial strategy as a response to it. It'll be looking to other government departments and other resources to be able to support what that local growth plan needs to do. So the industrial strategy is only one element of the picture, not the whole picture. But the first task we were given was to make submissions into the industrial strategy, which is what we did. And we made those on the basis of some things we agreed with and some things we felt were missing.
So, I think it is a really good question, and it goes to the heart of the conversations that we're in, because we don't just want to do what government tells us. So we're also trying to influence the national industrial strategy.
And just to add to that, and I suppose just demonstrate a benefit of having the combined authority, as a result of the consultation that's gone in from the combined authority that we contributed to and North Yorkshire contributed to, MHCLG we're having a roundtable discussion with MHCLG in January, with the universities, with North Yorkshire, with the combined authority, with some of our business representative groups to talk about the industrial strategy as a final kind of milestone in the consultation. Now, we would never have got that opportunity if we didn't have the combined authority. So it's almost like a direct line into central government to say, well, actually, you forgot food, and this is really important, among other things that we want to share with them. But yeah, so that's a really great opportunity for the city to shape national policy, essentially. I should say the city and the region to shape national policy.
Thank you. Very interesting. I have no more hands on the queue I've got here. So, and we have been on this item for comfortably over an hour. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. Councillor Fenton, I guess, sort of made a recommendation to include a nod to supporting people back into work, which has been acknowledged. Might colleagues have any other recommendations to raise? I mean, it's kind of early stages, isn't it? But
can I just ask Councillor Fenton, you also mentioned health.
Yeah, I was looking at the 10-year strategy, and there was more of a mention of health as a factor in enabling residents who are able to get back into employment. So he's really sort of bringing the health is an aspect of, you can have training, you can have access to other support, but if you don't have good health, then that kind of undermines all of it. So it's and that sounds a bit waffly, but something that just has a nod to that.
Yeah, it's recognising the impact of mental health and musculoskeletal and all those sorts of health issues that can prevent people working. Yeah, got that. Thanks.
yeah. But I like the direct language. Got time for it. Anything else from colleagues? I'm very grateful for all four of your time and your very thorough responses this evening. I'm sure we'll get this back very soon compared to how quickly other items return, given its significance. But yeah, thank you. It's appreciated. And thank you, members, for the wide-ranging questions. The next item, sorry, scrolling all the way back up to the top, is just the work plan. On the work plan, you'll notice, colleagues, that basically beyond January, we're getting quite open again. So I'm actively seeking suggestions. I've written to executive members today to see if they have any useful thoughts for what we might want to contribute to through scrutiny. But that offer stands to effectively all members, especially those on this committee. Councillor Healy and I had a meeting this morning as well, which was helpful. Councillor Whitcroft, is that a hand? Forgive me.
That is, thank you, Chair. Just in reference to a motion that I brought to full council a few months ago, and something that is being enacted is the Res Park citywide review. Is something that I've been speaking to the executive member about because it's my motion, very proud of it. But I think it would benefit massively from scrutiny if we could look at bringing Councillor Avilius to the committee. I think we'd be able to provide some valuable input and updates on how the work is going.
Thanks, Councillor Whitcroft. Yeah, it's a good call. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as I understand it, in 26, we are re-tendering the park and ride across the city. And therefore, I think the months ahead will be a really good opportunity for this committee to look at what we'd like to see in that re-tendering. I think there's only so many variables. I mean, one of the most common is that people would like it to stay open later.
Yeah.
And I think if we could potentially have it on our agenda, get a bit of media interest, a few people feeding in at a relatively early stage, which I would anticipate being, 3 months from now, whenever it may be, I think that could be a really positive thing for us to help shape it.
That's a really good shout, Councillor Stewart. Thank you. Councillor Fenton.
Yeah, just an item we've already got on our kind of long list, which is gender pay gap. Just if not to lose sight of that. The other one, obviously, there are changes afoot in relation to planning. And there was a white paper, green paper, white paper, maybe, published yesterday around potentially far-reaching changes to the planning system. Obviously, it's still at an early stage, and feedback from that consultation will inform consultations for proposals for formal consultation. But I suppose it's just to have an eye to potentially discussing that scrutiny, but at the moment there isn't a firm proposal to discuss. It's just there are discussions being had, but it's just to put that on the radar that there may be merit at some point in talking about that and the impact.
Yeah.
Of it.
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. That's helpful. Councillor Merritt, you had a hand up. I'll come to you, Councillor Hook.
Yes, I think there's a couple of potential ones. I think it's 6 months, 5 months since we signed off the Task and Finish Group's recommendations on dial-a-ride. I wonder if we could ask for the exec members and officers to give us an update on what they've doing with the recommendations from that. That's one.
Yeah.
Also, as I touched on with you at lunch, section 106 delivery. We have 9 million in the bank for providing measures to mitigate the impacts of previously agreed developments in the city. And as I understand it, the government is no longer intending to proceed with the SIL arrangements. So section 106 is going to continue. So in that sense, it might be useful to have a look at the system in terms of how well it works at the moment. If it's going to be the basis of funding those type, the support facilities for future developments, having a look at how the system works and how we can perhaps improve it for the future, if it's going to be there for years to come.
Yeah, welcome both of those, Councillor Merritt. You might come, will you?
I believe there's been quite a few looks at that by scrutiny over the years, because it's been identified as a bit of a problem area.
I guess that's, more to the point. And I think you mentioned that A&G have had a good look at this too.
We had a good going over the Verito internal audit report on section 106. And whilst it was generally an okay from Verito on it, it was clear that in terms of timeliness of spending the monies that we receive, they weren't really in a position to comment on that. There is a new IT software system, Exicom, that planning are using, but finance don't have access to it. Verito obviously didn't get into the detail on that. So that's one of the aspects that I think A&G would certainly supportive of having a further look at, but felt it was more one for scrutiny than for them.
Thanks, Councillor Merritt. Is that supplementary? Fire away.
Yeah, thanks. I think my gut feel, whenever it's been looked at by scrutiny before, it's been looked at after the section 106 has been agreed and how it's been spent or how it hasn't been spent. I do think there's a lot of potential to look at the process to get to that point, you know, because I am absolutely not saying that it's for members to write, you know, S106 or anything like that. It's clearly not. But you know, we've had one in Copmanthorpe, which people might have seen in the press, and members of the planning committee will have had an email from me about a ludicrous amount of money that's gone to Askham Bog, which has no basis that I can see of justification at all. And also, there's no openness whatsoever, you know, with great lengths we've gone to try and see why it was deemed that those houses were going to be so bad, the mitigation will be needed will be £2,500 per house. I think there's all sorts of things on the process there, you know, that we could beneficially look at. And one other example, I was surprised to find out a while ago that, you know, we used to have an amount of money that every house had to contribute S106 wise, which I think was, you know, a couple of £1,000s or something like that, whatever the circumstance, if you're just building 1, 2 or 3 houses. And it's in our local plan that every house will have an S106 contribution. But we apparently just don't have that anymore because we're just not bothered having that. And I didn't really quite understand why we'd have a situation where we'd have several houses built and thousands of pounds that could be going to various causes that we just wouldn't bother. Again, a not dissimilar thing in Copmanthorpe, we're going to have 4 very large houses potentially built, and the developer, I'm sure, wouldn't bat an eyelid at £10,000-15,000 or whatever it may come out at of S106. The village would love to have that money, but despite it being on local plan policies, we're just not bothering with it. So I think there's lots of aspects of the process. And again, sorry, back on the first one I was talking about, the developer that we dealt with in the application said a number of times to me, "Oh, well, of course, as ward member, you'll have had this." And it's like, no, not in York. It doesn't work that way. And he's talking about developments all around the country. And he says, "Well, of course you have that, don't you?" No, we don't. So I think there are issues.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have sympathy with the points you've raised. I think let's get it on the work plan and let's try and do it as properly as scrutiny can. Obviously, our hand is limited, but we can give it a good go. Yeah, Councillor Hook.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned earlier, trees. And not
Yes.
only that, but I have discovered that the planning rules on trees seem to have changed, because it used to be that a tree in a conservation area was as protected as if it had a TPO, but now apparently it isn't if the public can't see it. So I want to get to the bottom of that and all.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can flesh that out, but it'd be good to have a look at trees management. You know, what we're losing as well as planting, how the team are faring, because they're under an awful lot of pressure and have been for a while. But look, you've given me a good mix of stuff there. Emails are always open, of course, too. But effectively, by our January meeting, I'd like us to be able to see, and publicly too, a more fleshed out plan for the months ahead. Obviously, it's a living document; these things can change. But it'll be a bit of a guide moving forward after January. Outside of that, I've got no urgent business. Thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your night. Cheers.